we are live. G'day everyone, Mike Jerry here, and you are listening to My Creative Journey, Season 2, Episode number 3. This week I am joined by a wedding photographer, family photographer, small business photographer, and personal friend of mine, Madeline Williams, or Mads for short. Mads and I go way back. We grew up in the same small town together. We didn't actually know each other, but we knew of each other and we're in the same sort of circles. But we became friends once we both started our own photography businesses. And that's where, Mads and I really have grown to relate together over the years, and we've talked a lot about our own businesses. But one thing that Mads doesn't really know is that she was actually a big inspiration for me starting my photography business. I think for me, when I was first starting my photography business, I didn't know anyone around my age who actually had a photography business or any type of creative business really, on their own. So for her, and actually knowing of her and seeing her success that she was having at the age that we both started was incredible. And to be able to see what she was doing, it really pushed me to go, well, if she can go out there and do it at her age and be able to do it, then it means that it is viable and I can go out there and do it as well. So amazing to come full circle and get her on the podcast today to be able to speak about how she started her business and what she's been able to do with her business over the years. In this episode, we really touch on how she started her photography business, starting in family photography, then transitioning into wedding photography, more recently into small business photography, doing a lot of work with other people around town. I think that is super important for her and her journey and her growth to be able to hear about different ways that she has been able to make her business work and also update and grow over the years. I think that is really important because businesses can become very stagnant, especially if you're doing the same thing over and over again. And a lot of us creatives love to do everything. So I think speaking to Mads in this episode was really, enlightening to hear how many things she has been able to do. We also talk about the complexities of running a business in a small town or a small community. I think for her, where there aren't as many people, for me being in Sydney, I've got such a wide audience, so many people who are my potential clients. But coming from a small town, it's a question that I get a lot about how to actually target your ideal clients when those clients may not be in town. Or how do you make a sustainable business over the year when those clientele do ebb and flow? And I think Mads has a really good approach on this. So we're going to speak to her in this episode today all about that. But then we also touch on the idea of like niching down versus broadening your offerings, because I think one of the things that Mads does really well, and spoiler alert here, is that she has been able to really meet her clients where they're at over the years. She's never been someone who's been afraid from trying different styles of photography and offering different things to clients that she already has in her local area. Whether that be like offering like mini photography sessions, offering headshot sessions, offering brand sessions to small businesses owned by people who she has done photography work for in the past. So I think always servicing her clients and keeping clients front of mind has been something that Mads has been able to do really well. And hearing from her in this episode, was enlightening for me to think, how can I even help best serve my clients even after I have worked with them in the capacity that they originally booked me for. So I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you guys are able to get a lot out of this conversation, but let's turn me off for now and let's get into this episode because I think this is a really special one. Hey Mike. Okay, well, hello Mads and welcome to the podcast. Great to have you on today's episode. Now, I've known Mads for a couple of years, is an amazing wedding photographer in the space that I'm in. I've worked with her a couple of times actually myself, and always great to work with Mads. So really nice to have you on the podcast. We actually come from the same small town. So it's great to have someone on the podcast from the area that I'm from and to be able to speak a little bit about that. How are you today, Mads?
Yeah, good. Thank you so much for having me on the space today. I'm excited to chat and talk about this whole situation.
No worries. It ought to be good. I think it's really nice to, include a vast variety of people, and I've spoken about that on the podcast before about I want this podcast to be a space about not just talking about photography in general, because I don't think, I am interested in it, but it's not the only thing that I like to talk about. I'd like to hear about other people's stories from all different types of creative spaces. So being able to hear from your story and your journey, I think is going to be really helpful for a lot of different people because, I gain a lot out of that. And I'm sure that you've been able to gain a lot from other people in your spaces as well. So hopefully by sharing your story and everyone else's story, we'll be able to expand the experiences of a lot of different people. But the first question that I wanted to ask is, how is your small toe? How's that going?
I did kick a door on that Saturday night and I think I broke my pinky.
Broke your toe.
So, yeah.
How is it? Are you able to walk around?
Yeah, it's all right. I put shoes on the first time today because it's just too cold to wear sandals.
The
So
worst.
it's all strapped up and yeah.
I don't know about you, but I'm often like stressing about what happens if I injure myself. Like as a person who
Yeah.
works on their own, like what happens when you injure yourself and you're not able to work? Like how do you how do
Yeah.
you sort of go about that in your own head? Is that something that you stress about, or is that just me thing?
All the time. Yeah, I'm mostly worried like what if I, go blind one day? What do I do then? Like it's a constant anxiety I have, but I guess you kind of just got to stick through it and wait till something does happen.
Yeah, I'm always like that a bit, like especially at the moment as well, because everyone's been saying to get the flu around me, and I'm like, if I've got
Yeah.
work on and I'm unwell, like it's not a profession where you can just call in sick. So
No.
what do you do in those instances? Have you had that happen before, where you've had to?
Yeah, so late last year I was doing shooting a wedding, and I just felt rotten the day of, vomit, diarrhea, the whole situation. And it was a 38-degree day or something, and it was stinking hot. And the last thing I wanted to do was shoot a wedding, but I just drank a lot of Hydrolite and hope for the best.
That's all you can do, right? I feel like
Yeah.
I'm like, when does it get to the point where whoever else, like if, like obviously, like worst case scenario, there are other people I could ask, and I'm very thankful for the community, and I'm sure that you have a community as well around you in your area of other people who you could ask. And I'm like, worst case scenario, I could probably get someone in. But where do you draw that line between the client has selected me as the artist? How is another person going to be able to do the job that I could do? Or I could just, like, even if I am unwell, I could just try to go through with it, even if I'm at 80% or half capacity on the day, even like having me there at half strength is easier than having another person, and then explaining it to them as well, like an hour before the thing, be like, here's all the information,
Yeah.
can you go do this?
Yeah, it's not the best situation to be put in, but yeah, I think you've got to do what you've got to do in the end. Hey,
Absolutely. I wanted to actually ask about your experience with the photography community in your area, or the more so the creative community as a whole, because I think that is interesting, because I definitely come from a background of being in, a larger area. There's a lot more people around. It's hard to really have community, and I get a lot of questions about this, about how do you really find community. I wanted to get your input on that. Being someone from a smaller town, how is the community there, and how do you work with, other people, especially in your space, but then in other spaces outside that?
yeah, I guess what's really helped me is working in a co-working space. It's definitely brought lots of vendors around me, as well as the networking. It's been fantastic, getting to know other people and hearing their stories as well. So it's definitely inspired me. Regarding like the competition around me, everyone's pretty lovely, so that's always a plus. And if I, need some sort of lens or something, I give them a call and they're happy to lend it. So it's pretty good. I think small community is really helpful.
Yeah, that's really nice, actually. Like, I feel like I'm like, I could ask a heap of people, but they're like, everyone has their own stuff on, Whereas when I feel like when you get that small community, it's like everyone understands that you're all they've got. So everyone is like, I'll be in that position of eventually. So, I want to be able to put that out there, because if it happens to me, I need someone as well. What's it been like working in the co-working space? What other types of people do you get there?
Yeah, so there's web designers, there's graphic designers, there's a whole bunch of different people. There's business owners, like entrepreneurs. It's just a really fantastic place to work, and for me, it's so much better than working from home, because I get up and I go to work as per se, and it's just really helped me and my mental state to get up and get out of bed and just start.
Also, I guess the other thing is, like, I've always been a strong believer in that there's no opportunities going to hit you in your like a lounge room. Like, you're not going to run into anyone in your lounge room. You have to be out of the house to get any opportunities. You got to go and like speak to people. And I suppose like that would have been, even if they're not in your industry, like having connections often can lead to other opportunities. in
Yeah,
in
100%.
other, in other environments, especially you as a photographer. Like, I know myself, I'm happy to do any type of work. Like, I like to specialize, obviously, and I think that's important, but I like to be able to do any type of work just because I'm interested, just because as a photographer, that's the work I
Yeah.
like to do. Has that been something that you've found other opportunities in work through being around other people?
Yeah, 100%. In the last 12 months, I've done more business shoots than I have ever before, basically because I've been working around people that are seeing my work and going, hey, I want some photos of my business, and that'd be really good. So, yeah, there's definitely a lot more different types of shoots.
And is that like easier? I'd imagine it's like easier to broach that with another person who you've already had interaction with, right? Like working with, like I find that always a bit awkward about advertising your work and like trying to get in new clients. But when you're working with people who you've already had something to do with before, that has to be so much more easy.
Yeah, 100%. And they kind of understand who you are as well. So they can help you before you even get to the shoot because they know how you work.
Yeah, it's a interesting kind of space working with people who you do know. Like I always tell people, I'd rather work with people I know. I feel like there's a hurdle at the start between anyone who you go to take photos of, or in any artistic space really, where they don't know how to ask for what they actually want, but they break down that when you've already have a relationship with them before. Like you've already have that hurdle broken down. They're happy to be honest with you. They're happy to ask for exactly what they want, and then you can work back the other way as well.
Do you find when you do a shoot, it's like awkward, like at the first 10 minutes of doing a shoot, and then by the end of it, like everyone's happy, you're happy, and you've created the best work at the end because everyone feels comfortable?
Always at the end.
Yeah.
And I always express that early on as well. Like especially if I'm working with people who I haven't actually spoken to before, which is very like, I always try to speak to people, either online, in person, always beforehand. But when I'm talking to people who I haven't worked with before, I'm like, this is going to be awkward. Like this is going to be weird to start. It always is. And so at the end though, in that last half hour is when I get like 80 to 90% of my images. Like I don't get any from the first half hour. I'm just there to like sort of clear the air. Like that first half.
You got to warm it up.
That first half hour, I'm not going to get anything of interest. And if it's awkward, that's okay because it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be breaking down, especially if they've never had any, if they've never been in front of a camera before. It is a weird space to be in. Like I hate it. So I stay on the other side of a camera, so I can't complain.
That's what I say too.
So it is going to be awkward. So I'm like, just almost embrace that and let's work through that together because at the end it is going to create something special. And I feel like if I'm working with other people I've worked with before, had some type of relationship before, I can even be more open and honest with them about all that stuff at the start, and then you sort of get your head over that hill a lot earlier than you normally would. I wanted to go in, Mads, and go right back to the start about the whole aim of this podcast is about your creative journey. So I wanted to ask you about your creative journey. How did you start as a creative person? Because you were someone who started, like, as far as I'm aware, straight out of high school. And to me, I wasn't even in a stage where I was having any ideas of, starting a business or doing anything creative out of school. What was that journey for you? Were you always someone who was a very creative person?
Yeah. To give you a bit of context, on my 5th birthday, I got a little Canon power shoot for my 5th birthday. That was 20 years ago.
Always a pro. Wow.
Yeah. Always Canon too. Sorry. But yeah, no, I've kind of always been creative. I struggled a bit in school because I guess I wanted to make everything visual and showcase all that, where everything was mostly words and stuff like that. So yeah, the creative side has definitely always been there, but I never thought it would take me this far, to be honest. So it's kind of exciting.
It's interesting, like obviously you weren't sort of planning on it early high school, but it's interesting to think about, like we overestimate how much we can achieve in a day and underestimate how much we can achieve in a year. But I think even like further out than that, we have no idea what we can achieve if we actually start something. And I always tell people that I had no idea where I'd be today had I not started. Where was your aim when you did first start? Like what was your plan to actually do as a photographer? Or did you even start it? Did you even think that you would be doing like photography? Was there another artistic career that you wanted to go down?
Look, when I was 18, I got in a traineeship in childcare, and obviously that doesn't pay bucket loads of money at all. So I kind of did photography as a little bit of a side thing. And it definitely, I just thought, oh, I'll just shoot on the weekends and work during the week. And like 3 or 4 years later, it kind of switched. So I was working 1 or 2 days in childcare, and then like the 5 other days was photography. So it's definitely crazy how quickly that has grown. And I definitely was not intending for it to do that, but it's worked out really well so far.
What was the, like you said, you started in childcare and then worked on the weekends. Did you ever have like career aspirations to work in childcare, or was that just something that you were like, I'm going to do that in order to be able to sustain the other work that I would like to do outside that?
I did not want to work in childcare at all, but it was the only job I could get into that required no experience.
Yeah. Interesting that.
And yeah, I had no other choice because I needed to pay bills.
It's also like, I think, I don't know about your experience, but like I worked in hospitality for a long time, and it's like trying to get a job that doesn't require too much energy of you. Like anything that you can do that's not going to drain you at the end of the day. Was that something that you felt was okay working in childcare initially?
No, it definitely was very draining, and yeah, it still is. Yeah. I don't know. I think that's kind of why I just try and not work on the same days that I work in childcare, because it's just too, you come home and you're exhausted.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, during the week I actually worked in hospitality as well, funny enough. And then on the weekends I was doing the photography stuff.
And what did you sort of start with? Like what was the aim always to do like a wedding photography, or?
Not at all. No. To be honest, weddings, I had no idea what a ceremony even was when I shot my first wedding. So no, weddings were not something I intended on doing. I was doing mostly just families, especially the ones in the childcare centre I was working at. Yeah. And that's kind of how it started. And then I left that centre, and then one of the parents messaged me on Facebook going, hey, do you want to shoot my wedding? And I was like, what? Okay. And I was like, I don't even know how much to charge. Like, I don't know what to do. And she's told me the date, and I was like, okay, well, I'll be there. I didn't know the time. I didn't know how long I was going to be there for. I definitely did not bring the right gear either, but that's kind of where it started. And I used those photos to then go, hey, look, I do weddings. And that's kind of how it kicked off with weddings. It's
interesting, right? I feel like it opens up sort of two ideas for me that like, you obviously you were already working in childcare, so you had access to a lot of people, to do that type of work. But then it's also the other thing of like, those people probably weren't after their images anyway. Like, I'm sure they were, but it's like they just happened to know you, and they happened to know that you were in that space. So they were like, oh, well, I trust her, so it's probably going to be good. So why not just have a chance on her, And I always tell people that with photography, it's like when you can put yourself out there, you can open up a new audience by being very relatable to people, and to kind of, you can bring people in who probably weren't your ideal client before. You can bring them into your ecosystem. You can sort of provide them with something that they didn't actually know that they really needed before. And I'm sure in that space it would have been like, as soon as you did like one person's family photos, everyone would have been like, oh, I didn't know that person did family photos. I'm after them as well,
Yeah, when I did like mini sessions, like for Mother's Day, I think I did like 3 or 4 from the centre. They all just piled in one after another. It was quite funny. It was like a little reunion.
Is that where you first wanted, like, did you first start wanting to do family photography, or was that just something that came out of coincidence that you already knew that you could get people in?
Yeah, no, not really. I personally didn't like people that much back then, so I just kind of had to do what I had to do, really.
It's interesting, right? Because I feel like I've worked with you before, and I feel like you're someone who does work well with other people. Like, I feel like I'm at the opposite end of that spectrum, where I'm like, I don't really want to have much to do with people. Like, I did a bit of family photography in the start, and I was like, that's too much interaction. Like, whereas for you, I'm like, that really feels like your style. So it's interesting to hear from the inside perspective from you, to be like, no, that wasn't something that I really was trying to do initially, but just ended up in it.
Yeah. I think it was also really helpful that I knew the kids from work, and it made the job so much easier. Whereas now I do family photos and it's tough because the kids don't know me and they don't trust me. So it's definitely a lot more challenging.
And do you find that like an interesting like creative outlet as well? Like working with, because I always find like working in other industries, working in other styles of photography, I find that very creatively expressive in a way. Like it opens me up to new things that I wouldn't have thought about in my like main style of photography. Is that something that you find as well? Like working with other, like if you can work with small children, you can probably work with anyone. If you can get them to act well on camera, like is that something that you're like, I'm going to actually do this as a bit of an exercise to be like to be actually prove to myself that I'm able to do that?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a mental thing. Like if I can get them to smile, then I've done my job right. So yeah,
that's really cool. I feel like you have been someone who has always had their hand in so many different things, and I've always been like, how do you manage to sort of juggle that between doing so many different styles of photography?
Yeah, I've got to blame the ADHD on that one. I think that's the only way I can get through that. I never am fully satisfied, so I think that's why I dabble in everything.
I can understand that. I'm like all over the place as well. But like, is that something that you sort of planned for, or is it just like as work sort of comes your way, you're happy to do anything, or are you actively like trying to put yourself in spaces to get work in completely different styles of photography?
Yeah, people ask me this all the time, why don't you niche down and stuff? But for me, photography is the niche, and that's what I love the most. And I kind of just enjoy doing any type of photography, and I love making people smile. So that's kind of why I do all the different types that I can.
I think that as well. Like, I mean, there's obviously upsides, right, to trying to like specialize more in one area. But if you're not happy at the end of the day, then what's it all worth? And I always say that I'm like, I started this because I enjoyed it and I'm happy. And it was something that was able to bring me a lot of happiness. Why would I throw that away just to go and do the exact same thing every day? Like, I'm like, I want to try a few new things.
It's good to, there's lots of different things. My days never look the same, ever. And I really enjoy that because going up and doing the same thing every day is just not what I want to do. So you were
I think before that you are doing some headshots and doing some corporate branding photography. Is that, and you've done like, I feel like you've done like really like event stuff, you've done hospitality stuff. What is the one that you really enjoy the most?
Everybody asks me this and I can't answer because I love them all.
I need an answer, Maddie. Come on.
I know. Honestly, I think maybe couple portraits. I like two people, working with just two people. Sometimes one as well is great, but yeah, just portraits in general, no matter what type.
Are you someone that works? Are you someone that does photography also as a hobby? Like, do you ever go out just to do photography outside of work?
I try my best to take photos of random shit, but I can never follow through with it.
Because I feel like I'm the worst. Be paid. Like I don't have any. Like I scroll through on my phone every now and again. I'm like, I don't have any images of like I was on holiday. I don't have any images the whole time I was away because I'm just like I'm on break. Like you know.
Yeah. Put that camera away. I've got my phone for a reason.
And I feel like if I am going out to take photos as a hobby just to like practice, I'm like, I have to organize it. Like it has to be a planned thing. It's not just going to happen out of nowhere because I'm at the end of the day, I'm just over it. And I'm like, I need a break.
I think that's what I miss though, those like spontaneous shoots that I used to do because everything's booked like 6, 12, 18 months in advance. So I kind of miss having that random, Sunday afternoon, you message someone, hey, do you want to come do this? And I do miss it because there's no expectations and you get to be creative.
That's true. Is that something that you feel like you would have a community around to be able to do that?
Yeah, I think so down the track, but honestly, I cannot fit it in.
That's the hard thing, right? It's like I don't have the space to be able to do it, and then afterwards I have to edit all those photos, so that's even more time in my day.
Yeah, that's it. You don't get paid for that one.
I feel like you are someone who like diversifies your offerings though. Like you're always doing like sessions, you did the headshot sessions, like trying to, and I suppose that work is like not as far out in advance, like you're not planning that forever out. Like, is that something that you're trying to do to try to get like a new thing happening every now and again?
Yeah, most of the time mini sessions are to fill my work up because there's usually a dry spell. That's kind of what they are to me. I'm not sure about other photographers, but I kind of enjoy having like 3 or 4 people come in, like 3 or 4 groups of people come in, do photos, and then I've got basically a bit of work to do afterwards, and it's quite good. I do enjoy it, and it also gives those the opportunity that can't necessarily afford a full shoot to get the proper photos and the professional shoot.
And also, I remember the ones you did for Mother's Day. It was very much you heavily like designed the space. Is that also something that you enjoy as well? Because I know like I don't get to really design spaces much. Like that would be something really cool to design a whole sort of photo shoot. Is that something that opens up a whole new sort of creativity for you?
Yeah, it was definitely something I've never done, like that extreme, and I really enjoyed it. It was really tough. I set up from like 3 o'clock to like 9 o'clock that night before, so it was crazy. But yeah, no, it was definitely really good, and it really inspired me because one day I do want to have a content studio / a photography studio one day. But yeah, that was kind of the first step in that.
Yeah, for sure. And do you find that it's like the types of people you're working with there are like are other people that you've worked with previously, or that it opens up to a new sort of, as you were saying, like it provides an opportunity for people who can't really afford to go out and do a whole hour with you or a whole afternoon with you to be able to get some photos. Is it like a new sort of clientele that you're getting in that?
Yeah, a lot of the time there are new clients because they've heard about the shoot and they can see that it's quite affordable. So it's definitely opened up broad doors for that as well. Yeah, it's a lot of the time they are different and sometimes they're the same as well.
Yeah, because I feel like a lot of people, I think the biggest struggle for most artists really is trying to find new clients, like especially in our space where it's like a lot of clients we work with aren't like repeat clients. So you're constantly finding new clients. How do you find that in a smaller town? Are you working like a lot with people who are sort of been referred to you by other people you've worked with, or is it harder to find new clients?
Yeah, a lot of my clients do come from other vendors and people that aren't available, especially for weddings, I guess. Yeah, a lot of my clients, they do start to stick around after the wedding because I can do their family photos, and then I can do, if they've got a business, I can travel out to their business and do business photos. If they've got a big event coming up, then, I do the events. So I think not niching down has definitely helped finding my clients.
Yeah, because I get that a lot from people. Like I get a lot of questions from people asking me like, how do you stand out or how do you create a business in a smaller community where there may be a lot of other photographers in the space? You may not be able to find your clients all the time. Like there actually may not be that many people, choosing to get married in that particular year. What do you do? And I feel like always the answer is like, you have to be able to diversify yourself a little bit. You have to be able to be open to do other things, and working with other clients again and again to be able to get that kind of repeat work. Because once you do have a client, I'm sure that as well, like they're really happy to come back to you again. Like as long as you do a good job, and I'm pretty sure that you would. Like they're happy to come back because it's like it's easy to come back. They're like, I feel okay with this person now. Like it's always much harder to go to a new photographer than it is to go to someone that you've already worked with and actually trust.
Yeah, 100%.
What is it about sort of your brand that you think sort of stands you out a little bit more? Like I'm sure that you've kind of worked in a space with a lot of other photographers. I know that I've really had a hard time over the years as well, like standing out from other people's work, and not to feel like it has to be one person over the other. And I feel like, I don't like people that actually try to put other photographers down. And I know there's people that do that, but you're someone that's like trying to stand out in your space. What is something that you're trying to do actively to really stand out in your community?
I honestly think just showing up and being myself has really helped my difference show, I think. And yeah, it's definitely been more relatable to clients and things like that.
Yeah. I think like a big thing for me has been like my age. I don't know about you as well, but like the space that we're in, I feel like it's a very old industry. And I know I'm always on Instagram and things like that, and it's easy to feel like, oh, everyone's around our age. But I feel like the older people aren't on there. Like everyone who has heaps of work, they're not on there because they have a big sort of clientele already. It's easy to feel like the industry's not very old, but it is. And so I stand out, I think, in that way of being like, I'm not as old as everyone else around me. Is that something for you as well?
Yeah. I'm finding that we're in the prime time of weddings. Like, this is the age where people get married is, 22 to 30 is when people usually get married. So we're in that age bracket and people can relate to us and they're happy for us to come and photograph their life because we're similar ages and we've all kind of been through the same stuff.
Is that something that you felt that you didn't have that experience early on? Like, I'm sure starting as early as you did, was that something you were like working with older clients than you, being like, I don't have enough experience? Was that something that you were a bit hesitant about? I know I was.
Yeah, 100%. I was, doing this wedding and I was like, I've never even been to a wedding. Like, I've been to like my auntie's like years and years ago, but like, yeah, I definitely felt like a fish out of water that day.
I'm like, in any industry, it's like that. Like, I feel like you're always a little bit, you don't really know everything and you aren't ever going to know everything. But just being okay to start is an important place. Like, and being also honest that you don't know everything. Like, I know that there are too many people out there acting like they know way more than they do. And then when it actually gets to it, they're like drowning under everything because they don't really understand what it is they're trying to do. Whereas when you're open and honest with clients, I think they're like, oh, you're only early on. Who cares? Like, I don't care. Like, I'm happy to have you there and I understand that. So I'll go easy. Like, I don't really need to know what I'm up to anyway. Like, most of the people I talk to who are planning their like weddings as well, like, they don't really know what they're trying to do either. Like, we're all just trying to help each other. And I think that's the best place to come by.
Definitely, yeah.
Is that something, I know I sort of found it early on, like working with other clients who are other like humans in a way, like other just average Joes who are planning to get married. I found that sort of more interesting than working with businesses and organizations and that type of stuff. Because I was like, look, I really love to be able to help other people. Like, helping an organization that has a big budget for their photography is great, but like it's not work that really like fulfills me. Is that something that you still find? Are you in that space and think like it's great to work with other people who are at that same stage as you?
Yeah, I've noticed recently that I'm getting a lot of smaller businesses and on my books, and they're in a similar situation to me. They haven't had a professional shoot before. They don't know what to expect, and it's definitely good because they ask for me for help, and I'm like, okay, well, let's try this. Oh, that didn't work. Let's just try this one. And they're like, okay, cool. Like, they put their trust in me. So no, it's definitely good that we're all kind of in the boat together.
Yeah, it's really nice to be able to be actually trusted by a client as well. To be like, I'm the expert in this space, like, and to have them just be like, no, you 100% have everything. And because I trust that you know what you're an expert in. Like, I feel like when you go to someone else and you're a bit like indispensable and they don't really care about you that much, you're like, ooh, am I actually here to do the work or am I going to be here the next time? I don't know. Like, even if I do a good job, are they going to ask me back because they don't really care about me anyway? Like, I'd rather build that connection. And I guess, like as you said, like working with other small business owners, like you are a small business owner, so you understand a little bit about that. Has that been sort of like an evolution of your brand as well? Like being at that stage where you feel like you're okay to speak about those types of things?
Yeah, I think I've recently gone, crap, I actually have a business. Like, I need to put time and effort into this to actually get places. I can't just, rely on everyone around me. So definitely need to invest in my business as well.
What has been like a big sort of like a learning thing for you in having your own business? Like, I think a lot of people don't understand what it's like to have your own business. And for you, especially, you've gone through it from like an early age as well. What have been your biggest like learnings, or what are the things that you would change if you went back and started it again from scratch? I feel like for me, it would be like organizational stuff, like having a lot of like I feel like when I was first starting, I didn't have anything. Like everything was off an Excel spreadsheet and like trying to work things out and like planning, answering emails was all over the shop. I didn't know how to do it, didn't know how to respond, didn't know how to invoice people, like didn't have any sort of planning for anything. And now I'm like, as I go back to that stuff, if I ever need it again, it's like so hard to try to, like even all my images on hard drives from the old days are like all over the shop. Like I don't know where they are. Like if I needed them, I wouldn't be able to go back to them. So I'm always like, I try to like press that on other people. I'm like, make sure you get that stuff down pat from the start because you're in a prime space right now where you don't have anything.
Yeah. Organize that business. Yeah.
Is there anything else like that for you?
When I first started, I was using more expensive like subscriptions and stuff. So I think I probably could have done it a lot cheaper back then. So that would have been a lot more helpful.
Yeah, I think you don't really know what you need until you start. Like I'm like as much as other people can give you advice. And I know some people gave me advice about certain things that I chose to use, but things that I chose not to use as well. I then went back on those and was like, I actually need to try them, like just to see if they're all right for me and see, how they work for my business and for the way I like to do things. Because not everything is going to work for everyone, but it's nice to hear from other people. Obviously, like you're able to get I love hearing other people's advice on things, but it's like I've got to try them for myself. Just because it works for someone else doesn't mean it's necessarily going to work for me.
Yeah, I agree there.
What do you feel like is the next big evolution in the brand? I know you said you would love to own a studio. That would be really cool. Are you planning towards that, or have you got some other things happening in the works between?
Not necessarily. I'm just kind of taking it day by day, month by month. Really. Would love to have a studio here, but that's money and that's something we don't really have at the moment. So, no plans towards it yet. I do need to buckle down and have a little look at some stuff, but nothing really is happening over here. Really just poking along.
It's hard because as soon as you're like, I'm like, I don't want to commit to something because then other opportunities that arise, I'm not open to. Like, I'm always like, the strongest thing you can do is actually say no to things to provide yourself space to be able to do other things as well. Like, I always think about opportunities that I've had, and I'm like, if I had have committed to another thing, I wouldn't have had space to do this one thing. Just because I was like, oh, maybe it's for me. And then I eventually had an email further down the track asking me to do something else. I'm like, oh no, I'm not able to do that anymore. Like, are you trying to keep yourself a bit open to sort of go with the flow of whatever happens?
Yeah, I don't like I said, everything's kind of planned out for 6 to 12 months, and it's hard to think past that at the moment. We just bought a house in December, so we're just, doing the house renos and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, business is just business.
Yeah, it's amazing though that you've been able to get to that stage, and you're like, I'm able to, if I can just stay on that as well, like if I can just continue on, like it's been able to work obviously for me up until now, everything will be okay in the end. Like if I just continue on with it, is that something like for you? Are you enjoying the work obviously enough to just continue on with it to a point where it's like I'm just at that stage right now where I'm enjoying it. Like I don't feel like I need a change.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. And also I would like to be working full time with it, but I will get there eventually. It's more just of a time over matter situation.
That's always the thing. It's like when do you sort of break that and decide to go? Like as you said before, it's like you don't want to be super drained having another job, but then you also need the income as well. So where do you draw that line of being like, I'm actually happy to get more space back, but not have as much income so that then I may be able to grow? Everything I feel like is just like, again, like you can have as many people's advice on that as you want, but you have to do what's the best for you in that situation. And everyone's situation is very different. And so talking to other people is great to be able to gain insight and hear from different people, but you've got to actually try things yourself just to make sure that is going to work for you.
Yeah, it's all trial and error, isn't it?
It definitely is. I don't really have any other questions for you, Mads. I was going to ask if there was anything that you wanted to share, any stories that you wanted to share at the end before we close out this podcast episode.
Not necessarily, no. I think everything's kind of been covered.
No. I think it's been a good chat, and I think it's, I'm always interested to hear about other people's stories and how they've been able to grow and what they're actually trying to do in their business and what ways that they sort of think about things. It's nice to, obviously hear from someone like yourself who I feel like we sort of share a lot of things in that way as well. And we're open to trying new things and try to to go on and sort of do everything as well. And I feel like that's very inspiring for a lot of different people, that they can have a career but also enjoy it as well. Like, you don't have to throw yourself in and just do things just to earn an income. Like, you can actually do things that you enjoy and spread yourself out in a lot of different ways and do things that you really like. So that's been really inspiring to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you for having me on the podcast.
No worries at all. And where can people find you if they would like to get in touch or hear more about your story or follow along your journey?
Yeah, so everything is Snaps by Mads, double D on Mads, on Instagram, Facebook, even YouTube, but don't go on there, and TikTok.
I see that too. I don't have anything on there.
No.
I will leave everything in the description of the podcast as well, and I'm sure we'll have some other stuff online for other people where they can find you. But thank you so much for being on the podcast today, Mads. I really do appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me. It was really good to chat.
Been a great conversation. Well, that is the end of today's episode. I really hope you enjoyed listening to this conversation half as much as I enjoyed having it. If you did enjoy today's episode, I would really appreciate it if you did leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or a 5-star rating on Spotify. Or if you're watching over on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and leave us a comment down below to let us know that you did enjoy this episode. Also, feel free to share this episode on Instagram and tag me at Mike Jeffrey Photography so I can reshare them on my stories. And also message me and let me know who you would love to hear on an upcoming episode of this podcast. I've always tried my best to be able to have conversations with people who are in the creative space and people that I think would be a good fit on this podcast. And I would love your input as well. In a very privileged position at the moment where, I'm able to reach out to people and have them on my podcast and have really interesting conversations with a whole range of people in the creative space and talk about their creative journey. So if there is anyone you would love to hear from, please let me know and I will do my best to try to get them on the podcast. At this time, I would also like to acknowledge the first creatives of the land on which I am recording today, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people of so-called Australia. As we tell stories of today, I just want to reflect on how First Nations people here and across the globe have guided and informed our understanding of the creative journey. But until next week, friends, have a lovely week and I will speak to you all again next Monday. Bye. Editing and post-production on this episode was done by Mossy Media, and music was created by JWPATON.